The purpose of Wealth Talk is to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain you on the subject of building your wealth. WealthBuilders recommends you should always take independent financial, tax, or legal advice before making any decisions around your finances.
Today's episode is brought to you by WealthBuilders Membership, a proven step-by-step process that helps you achieve financial security within 2 to 3 years. To find out more, head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership. Welcome to this week's episode of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Chris. Good to be with you again. How was your little jaunt to Ibiza?
It was wonderful. Thank you. Yes, I was best man at my friend's wedding, and it's a magical place. I've been to Ibiza many times before and never fails to disappoint. So, yeah, it was great. Thank you.
How'd the speech go?
Yeah, it went really good. Very well received. Got some laughs, got some tears. So I think it did the job.
Oh, that's the best combination, isn't it, really? Bit of humour, bit of pathos. Good on you.
It was good. And you were out and about, weren't you, yesterday? A couple of weeks ago, of course, we interviewed Nick James, the CEO of Expert Empires. And this weekend is his big event in London. Yes,
it was. I went for a day just to really experience what the event was all about. They sent me a ticket, which was kind of them, and it was a packed audience in London, maybe 400 people, maybe more. I didn't count them; there were so many, but packed full of good information, some really powerful other speakers. Actually, some overlapping with wealth building, like buying a business, and it was just a really interesting event to see so many people desperately trying to do better. And I think that, and he does it well. So I was pleased with the invitation, and I would encourage people to go check out Expert Empires.
Absolutely. And whilst we're talking about events, we've got our own events coming up. So I'll quickly mention those. 10th of October, I'll be back in London hosting the Cashflow 101 event, the game created by Robert Kiyosaki. So come along, grab a ticket. And in Bournemouth, my local town now, on the 24th, I will also be hosting a Cashflow event. And you can come along, play the game, or you can just come along and say hello, network, meet some like-minded people. So both of those events are on the WealthBuilders website, wealthbuilders.co.uk/events. And whilst you're there, why not register for our next webinar, which will be on the 22nd of October. And that one's all about how to create a clear path towards financial security. And we'll be showing our members and anyone wanting to find out more about Wealth Builder membership, Kevin, exactly what our process is to help people to generate multiple streams of recurring income from assets.
And I mean, the way I look at it, the fundamental ethos of creating recurring income from assets, which is such at odds with the traditional teaching in schools and universities, which is get the education, get the job, and then save your way to retirement, which is a long old journey, 30 years probably. We can teach people how to do that in 3 to 5. So wouldn't you rather be set for life after 3 to 5 years than 35 years? You know, if you're interested in that, come along, see what it's all about.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on to our main event today, which is our conversation with Seb Inglis-Jones. And Seb is the co-founder of a company called Maeving, and they're Britain's first electric motorbike company. So innovators, Kevin, and today's story is really a good one. We wanted to feature this because it's one about resilience, because we know business can give you so much. And in terms of asset, it can build wonderful recurring income, can give you that freedom eventually. But as we'll hear from Seb today, those early years as a startup can be challenging.
Well, we've seen this before. I remember we interviewed Louise Hill, didn't we, from Go Henry, and she was saying, you know, she worked so many hours and had did so many pitches to raise funding, and that resilience was her number one lesson, and that, you know, that in the end, the business will create substantial wealth for her, but the effort you have to put in if you're trying to make the business the primary source of your wealth building is monumental. And so it is, you know, today. So we don't always advocate you put all your eggs in your business basket to build your wealth alongside your business. So create recurring income inside your business and recurring income outside of your business to sort of build a stepping stone in case the business doesn't sell, because only a handful of businesses, statistically 0.1% of businesses sell for life-changing money, and I mean $1 million plus. And that's probably not life-changing anymore, £1 million, is it? Especially not with taxes. And, we'll be signposting a bit more in future podcasts about the budget, because I think it's the most feared budget I've seen in my 30-odd years of being around finance, Chris. I'm just seeing people nervous as anything about the impending changes that will touch all aspects of life, from personal tax, business tax, investments, pensions, inheritance in particular. So lots of people who've worked very, very hard to build their assets are fearful about what will be taken from them, or at least taken from the next generation. So we'll be doing some notifications, some events probably online and offline. So keep an eye on what we're doing, and we'll share that information with you.
Okay, so lots of good nuggets to be taken from our conversation with Seb today. So let's head on over to today's conversation with Seb Inglis-Jones. Okay, I'm pleased to welcome Seb Inglis-Jones, the co-founder of Maeving, Britain's first electric motorbike company. Seb, it's great to have you on the Wealth Talk podcast. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Whereabouts in the world are you today?
I am speaking from my London flat where I live with my wife. I'm just in the process of moving, as I mentioned, and this is where I live when I'm not in Coventry at the factory, at the flat that I share with my co-founder, which is quite intense, but
Well, we're going to hear all about the story today. And it was actually one of my colleagues, our senior consultant, Gary Whelan, who sent me your interview, which he did on the BBC, the You and Yours. And it was a very inspiring story, Seb. And, you didn't really know, you had this idea, you didn't know how you were going to achieve it, but you have, right? And so many people have ideas, but many never do anything about it. What makes you different, Seb?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. Look, I think that there are certain traits that every entrepreneur has that are key to starting a business. So high risk tolerance, a bit of stupidity when it comes to assessing, your life, and I guess stepping away from serious jobs. But I think, we didn't, as I said on that interview, we didn't set out to start an automotive business. My co-founder and I met at university, and we both wanted to start a business. We decided to start a business together because we became close mates. But at that stage, all we knew was it was going to be in some way contributing to the fight against climate change. And it was only later on, as we sort of, ideated and eventually got into the world of electric motorbikes, that through the process of just putting one step in front of the other, we ended up with a British automotive company making bikes and exporting them around the world. I think if I'd have told my sort of 16-year-old self that's what I'd be doing, I'd be worried and shocked.
Yeah. So for any listeners who might not know about Maeving, can you tell us a little bit more about the company and the vision that you had at the beginning there?
Sure. So we are Britain's first electric motorcycle manufacturer. We've got a team of, I think, 46 it is at the moment. We've got a factory in Coventry, which is really the kind of the beating heart of the British automotive industry. It's where all the original players were making bikes right from the end of the 19th century. And we make electric motorbikes that are geared towards primarily urban riding. And the key thing is that they have removable batteries. So batteries that you take out of the vehicle, charge at a standard socket, so that you overcome that huge barrier to electric adoption, which is essentially poor charging infrastructure and the range anxiety it induces. And I guess the final thing I'll say is that all our bikes they really sort of lean into the British heritage of motorcycle design. So they're quite kind of classical retro. And I'd like to think that they would make you think of the kind of greatest eras of British motorcycle design.
And is this a passion of yours from a young age, motorbikes?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, more. Cars was the first one, and then bikes came a little bit later. But yeah, I've always, I've grown up with posters of cars and bikes all over the place. Fanatic watcher of Top Gear and Chris Harris before he joined later Top Gear, but actually bikes. As I said, it was more cars. I love driving, but bikes was slightly more of a practical consideration. It was the realization later in my life that if you were to switch sort of, crappy public transport, I had a job that I got in Slough, and I had to commute on a bicycle to Paddington, train from Paddington to Slough, company shuttle bus. It took about an hour and a half. And I worked out that if I swapped that for a motorbike, I'd save 26 days a year in commuting time. And then I guess when I got on the bike, you can't go back. It's so much fun. It's such a good way of getting around town. So I think I developed that bug a little bit later, even though I had posters up of bikes on my walls.
They say obviously entrepreneurs are, always identifying problems, right? And trying to come up with a solution. So would you say almost that was, the first steps in saying, well, hang on here, I'm working out how I can make a saving. And then the perfect storm of obviously the move towards electric. And you thought, hang on, we could actually do something with this.
Yeah, so sort of, getting on a bike and realizing how sort of fun it was and affordable and manageable versus a car was definitely the catalyst to having bikes on the mind, as it were. The key thing that we, sort of the gap, the problem we were solving was just that there was no such thing as an electric motorcycle or scooter. Certainly in the West, there absolutely was in Asia, when we started the business. And we were sort of captivated by why that was the case. At that stage, there was a lot of discussion around EVs. You had countries like Norway that had just got to 50% electric in car sales, for new vehicles registered that year. And yet no one was saying anything about bikes. So that was what sort of got us interested. Why was that the case? And then what we discovered was that China had completely leapfrogged the rest of the world in birthing an industry of sort of low capacity removable battery two-wheelers. To the extent they were selling over 20 million a year. It was crazy. When we started the business, there was just 297 electric motorbikes and scooters sold in the UK in total. So, quite a disparity. And we thought, why is that the case? And what can we do to address that, over here, with a kind of more of a UK European, mindset.
Yeah. And what year are we talking about there, Seb?
So, it's interesting. It's 2018 that we incorporated the company, but it was only sort of just over 4 years ago that we brought on the first members of the team. So there was a sort of preamble to the business as it looks like today, where we considered importing a Chinese bike. We considered all sorts of things that didn't ultimately work out before going, right, we'll do this ourselves. We'll raise money, we'll build a team, and we'll develop our own products. And as I said, sort of in answer to your initial question, it took us sort of a year and a half to get to the point where we had the confidence and the kind of determination, I guess, to respond in that way versus like an import business, for example.
So I guess it's in that year and a half, that almost that wilderness phase, right, where many people, they never actually make it, right? They die with the weeds, and you're not paying yourself on the business. You're waking up every day and probably barely getting any sleep during those years as well. I mean, what kept you going?
To some extent, yes, to all of the first bits. Actually, on the sleep front, that was when we were getting sleep. That was the golden era of sleep, because we had a bunch of kind of gig jobs that we were doing to pay the bills. And we sort of got it down to a fine art. So we were only doing about 1 day a week of earning work. I mean, we had, we were paying ourselves like 18 grand a year. And then we devoted, 4 to 5 days a week to sort of starting the business. But back then, when you don't have the pressures of investment, you don't have, mouths to feed in the form of a team, you're kind of on your own time. And so that was actually a less of course, you've got the burden of having quit your job and told all your mates that you're going to do this. So there's definitely an expectation. But that was a lot less stressful than the scenario where you're kind of exporting bikes around the world and there's financial pressures and all that.
And were there moments throughout that phase when you looked at each other and said, can we actually continue? Is this actually a viable idea here?
Many times, absolutely. Yeah, we spent 8 months pulling together a plan for an import business that didn't work out. We went out to China, spent a month there, looking at the supply chain, looking at products, basically coming to terms with the fact that the first iteration of the business wouldn't work. Lost all of our, spent all of our money, came back, tails between legs, broke. Decided that we needed to earn some cash, did a bit of film production. That was incredibly stressful. It was not relaxing. Took a bit of a break from each other as co-founders, a bit of a breather, and then came back together and went, actually, the market opportunity here is too exciting to miss. And so let's do this and let's start from scratch. Let's build a prototype. Let's concept our own design, and eventually fundraising and so on. So yes, there was the graveyard of almost leaving it,
So can we just fast forward to today and give some context then? So obviously where you were back then, where things are today, and then we'll go back and we'll fill some of those gaps. There's lots and lots of questions that I want to ask you about those, those steps.
Yeah, so we're now the sort of best-selling player in the UK with a good market share. We just won the industry award from MCN for the best urban electric, beating the likes of Kawasaki and BMW. I think it's fair to say that our bikes are some of, if not the best reviewed bikes around the world. Just moved into a factory at the end of last year where we can produce up to about 11,500 units. So we're, really kind of ramping up. I mean, in some ways that might sound like quite a small, number of units, but it's quite a nascent market at this stage. Although in low power, the government has mandated that we switch fully to electric by 2023. So there will be a big seismic shift. As I said, team of 46, and we just expanded very recently into the US and France and Germany, and have ambitions to expand beyond that next year. And grown about 300% in terms of revenue versus last year. So we're in the growth stage now. And I think thanks to our incredibly experienced team, and we can come onto that, because that's really what's behind the business success. I think we're well positioned to sort of, lead the charge in other markets.
And was it 2033, the switch to electric? Is that the date?
2030 for low power, for sort of 125cc and below. It's kind of a particular category within the motorcycle market.
Yeah. And who is your avatar, your market? So just talk us through the spec of the bikes. And obviously the key thing here you said is the removable battery. So, how does that actually, affect people day to day in terms of cost and recharging?
Yeah, sure. So we have, so just to sort of run through our bikes, we've got a kind of, entry bike, which is geared entirely towards urban riding, top speed of 45 miles per hour, range of 80 miles. You're great when you're in a city, but obviously not doesn't make as much sense if you're in a kind of suburban or rural environment. Then we've got, and that price starts at around 5K. Then we have our latest bike, which has sort of twice the power, top speed of 70 miles per hour, 80 miles still of range. It's called the RM1S. First bike's called the RM1. That one's called the RM1S. And they both come with lots of storage, both come with the ability to charge your batteries off the bike. So just to sort of put that in context, the way that people tend to use them is that they'll be riding around sort of city all week. It'll give you about a week's worth of the average commute. And then on a Friday, you'll kind of take your batteries out and you'll charge them overnight in your flat, or you'll charge them at the office or in a cafe. But most people just sort of charge them overnight at home. And so you don't have that range anxiety thing where you're kind of worried about where you're going to find a charging station and trying to sort of plot that into your day. Because you can charge any 13 amp socket is a charging opportunity. So just as no one panics about the fact that an iPhone only gives you about 2/3 of a day worth of charge versus, for example, a Nokia 3210, good old 5 days worth of charge. The thing that's changed is our charging habits. And in a similar way, if you're able to turn every socket into a charging opportunity, you just reduce that range anxiety considerably.
And, storage is something that you mentioned where you've got the petrol tank, right? You now got lockable storage there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of the key things that sort of differentiates scooters and makes them so popular for commuters is that you've got that lockable storage under the seat. And well, we've got 10 litres of lockable storage in the tank. So you can put, change of clothes, your charger, your chain, your cover, all of the sort of accoutrement of riding, which is just, it just makes it really practical.
Yeah. And when did you first launch the first bike to the market?
That was April 2022 was the RM1. And then we launched the RM1S in September last year for delivery this year.
And in those 2 years or so, based on user feedback, have there been any major, changes, iterations that perhaps you didn't think of initially?
Well, I mean, I suppose from yes, insofar we had a lot of people who we're lucky that we have a really kind of positive and engaged customer base. We've got the sort of riders forums, and we get some really nice comments. But we also had people who wrote in and said, look, we love what you're doing with the design and the kind of ethos, I guess, on the first bike, but please get back in touch with us when you make a bike that can achieve highway speeds. Because I live, just outside a city centre, or I live in a kind of rural area and I want to use the bike for going to the village shop. Just other use cases beyond the kind of central city use case that we developed the first bike for. And that's what fed into the RM1S, and that's a completely different bike in terms of the power and the feel that it gives you. Also with that bike, you've got the option of charging it on board as well. So you can plug the bike in directly. So if you have a garage, or you have a sort of obvious opportunity to plug it in, it just gives you that optionality to make it easier for the consumer.
Okay, let's go back then to those early days. Funding is one of the big areas where many new businesses fail. How did you fund the initial early? Did you work with investors at all?
Yeah, so we did a kind of tiny, and by tiny I mean like 25k kind of family and friends round, just to give us the money to build the initial prototype. So we worked with a great industrial design company called Bang Creations, a very small company in Hazelmere, to basically go from kind of the concept sketches that I'd done in a very basic form and the powertrain that my co-founder had spec'd, and a kind of briefing document, to what they call the works like, looks like prototype. So that's something that a kind of first stage concept bike. If you were to actually kind of pop the hood and look into it, you'd find a mess of wires, but from the outside, ostensibly, it looks like the finished product. Or we thought it did. When I look at it now, I think it's a couple of steps behind where I felt it was at the time. You could ride it and you could get an impression for what we were trying to create. We then took that on a kind of roadshow to VCs and angel investors to sort of pull together our first proper round. And we started that a month before COVID. We got probably about £1 million on the table, and then all of that was taken away when in March, when everyone kind of woke up to the reality of COVID, and investors were just like, look, we're on pause until everyone works out how serious this is and what the implications are. And so I guess for the sort of second or 50th time in a row, we felt like everything had come to an end, despite having built this great prototype. But the good thing about I guess one of the things that happened in COVID is that people realized that there were some businesses that were going to do incredibly well. And one of the sectors was personal mobility. E-bikes sales went through the roof because no one wanted to get, be on a crowded tube. And so investors sort of came back to the table, and we were able to get a deal done later that year. Which is obviously when we had the capacity to make our first hires, and when everything changed ultimately.
That really is the entrepreneur roller coaster, isn't it? I mean, just thinking back to that moment when COVID struck, when that investment money disappeared, I mean, it probably gives you a funny feeling in your stomach now thinking.
Well, luckily, not luckily or not luckily, I mean, so many, subsequent painful things have happened that one's wiped out. But I mean, if you can imagine it, we were, I would bicker with my co-founder about whether we had the cash to hire a van to drive a prototype to an investor, and whether or not we should print out our investment deck. And, so when COVID came, it completely, I certainly had no income. My co-founder had to go back to South Africa, where he's from, to go and be with his parents. It very much felt like it was all over. So the moment where you get your first investment and you suddenly realize that you can properly fund this dream that you've had for a long time is magical.
Let's talk about joint ventures then. That's one of our 7 pillars, our model at WealthBuilders, Seb, and working with others so that you're pooling your resources, your knowledge, your funds, many, many things. And, the process of working together with Will, a co-founder, talks through that. Do you feel that, you could have done this by yourself, and how have you both kind of fallen into different roles and taken different responsibilities along the way?
No, so absolutely not. Could not have done it on my own. I think Will and I both feel that we each are half of a CEO, and between us we make one reasonable CEO. I'll let other people be the judge of that, but no, we couldn't. So I think that there's a couple of elements to that. One is just the sort of resilience that you need to keep going when things are tough. And if you have someone that you can kind of bounce ideas off and who can pick you up when you're feeling low, it's really, really helpful. I wouldn't start a business on my own. I would instantly look for co-founders. And I think the thing that's really, a lot of people make the mistake, and this is crazy because I'm talking about, I work with one of my close friends, but that's not a good premise for choosing a business partner. Ideally, you'd have someone that you work with before and you know that you can work with well. You've got a track record of working together so that you know each other's skill set and strengths and weaknesses. But it just so happened that we managed to sort of survive despite that, because we sort of trust each other implicitly. Will has a background in finance. He worked at KPMG, then Greenhill Investment Bank. He worked in sort of as an accountant, then he went into M&A, and I went in various sales and marketing roles across 2 tech startups, and then in the world of fast-moving consumer goods at sort of bigger companies like Reckitt Benckiser and Danone. And so we had this natural division of responsibility. Me more on the kind of product vision and the sales and marketing side, him more on the finance and the kind of maybe the detailed operations. But we make all of our decisions together. The thing that unites us is an ability to sort of debate and arrive at a positive conclusion, irrespective of our biases and our thoughts going into the discussion.
And have you managed to maintain the business just between the two of you now in terms of ownership? Have there been, discussions about sharing equity along the way? Well,
we have a big cap table, a sort of great investor base, and we also all of our team are equity incentivized as well. So everyone is a business owner, and that contributes to the kind of everyone pulling in the right direction for kind of mutual success. So I suppose the business is already shared amongst a good set of people. It's also a very capital intensive business, starting an automotive company. So it's unlikely that you would get very far without divvying up your equity.
So yeah, you give some good advice there, I think, for anyone listening, and I actually say the same thing. I do believe working with others makes it a lot easier and more enjoyable as well, right? It's a pretty tough game running a business by yourself. Let's talk about expanding into new territories. Then you mentioned now launched in California and some European territories as well. So did you do any joint ventures with distribution companies, like working with other people who understood those territories? How did that come about?
As a small business, we need to partner with bigger businesses to develop the technology that we use in our bikes. So I guess I think of our suppliers as partners, with this project, because as a small business, you need to partner with larger businesses to develop the technology. So, for example, like Bosch, I think of as a partner. We went to them to develop the powertrain for our first bike, and that's crucial to achieving the kind of quality that we wanted. So yeah, as I said, there's a kind of partnership element to all of our supplier relations. We rely on them for their expertise as to how to manufacture individual components, and they rely on us to ultimately be able to combine those components into a product that people will love. So that's the way in which I guess we've done joint ventures so far. But really further down the line, I think we built a product that makes sense in the UK and European market. But if we ever want to successfully enter the big Asian markets like China and India, so China's biggest market at the moment, China's the biggest EV two-wheeler market. India is the fastest growing and is the biggest motorcycle market, but both of them have a much lower price ceiling. The average product over there, people are paying $400, $1,000, not £7,000. So a joint venture with an Indian OEM, for example, to make a lower cost product, Maeving product, would be absolutely essential to be able to truly penetrate those markets. So those are the two kind of ways I think about JVs, but because we're a direct to consumer business, the international expansion piece, we've mainly been managing that ourselves. So we have general managers on the ground and we deliver and service bikes ourselves in the core markets in which we're operational.
So focusing then in on the financial growth, when you were obviously developing, were you looking to achieve a certain margin with the product?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that there's a sort of quite like an American growth model where people expect to be unprofitable for a much longer period of time. I think for us, it was really crucial that we had a good gross margin and the business, we could see, what our hurdle rate would be to profitability in the relatively near future. And I think the profitability of our bikes, and particularly through our direct to consumer model, is one of the things that we're most proud of.
Yeah, talk to us a bit more about that then. So obviously on the website, I see the banner at the top, and from £92 a month, you can own a wonderful Maeving motorbike. So how did you come about with that model?
Well, I think look, it's not a surprise that the legacy model is one of dealers and distributors, because in a kind of pre-internet era, that provides suitable advertising and logistics. But the reality is now that there's so many tools at your disposal to be able to offer, in our case, roadside delivery and servicing, and to be able to communicate effectively with customers, that it wouldn't make sense not to go down that route, because the direct route gives you direct relationships with your customers, and then they become much more brand loyal, and you'll hopefully see them returning to sort of repeat purchase further down the line. I certainly know as a consumer, if I order anything from a kind of sofa to a car these days, I would ideally like it to be delivered to my house, and I wouldn't like to have to go to the outskirts of a city to find, to a particular space to get it fixed. I would love it if someone could just come and do that at my house or my place at work, at my discretion. So I think, and actually the inspiration for that for me was, I think it was Simba, one of the companies that started delivering mattresses for the first time direct to consumer. And I thought everyone would have thought to themselves, hang on a minute, surely you've got to go to a shop and lie on a bed and a mattress to decide that you want it. But if someone offers you a service where they'll deliver it to your door, you can lie on it, and if you don't like it, you can send it home that day. It's amazing. And so we're lucky that we live now in a kind of tech-enabled space where you can perform that kind of service.
Let's look at, again, some of the challenges that you've had to take along the way. So some of the calculated risks, how are there any in particular that come to mind? We've talked obviously some difficult times during COVID, as well with Ukraine and Russia. I believe when we were talking, you said that was another pivotal moment. How have you overcome some of those?
Well, I mean, look, the first thing I say is that every decision that you make as a young business is a calculated risk, especially before you're profitable and can sort of fund your own mistakes. So I think of the entrepreneurial journey as sort of littered with calculated risk. I mean, I think a big thing for us was having stepped away from the first year of thinking about importing a Chinese bike. And one of the things that we found when we went out there was that the quality, because all those products are built to a much lower price ceiling, the quality was less good. Chinese manufacturers are incredible at making high quality products. It's not so much that, it's just that the domestic market tends to require more affordable products that are less high quality. And we stepped away from that, realizing it was really important for us to, by contrast, focus on quality and make that one of the kind of cornerstones of the business. And so the kind of calculated risk that we took was to only hire very experienced engineers, to not do the kind of classic startup thing of hiring young, hungry, affordable, aspirational, individuals, but instead people who'd been there, done that for decades and decades. And obviously by doing that, you're bringing on a very, quite a high cost base. Our first hire was the former head of product at Triumph. For a long time, the least experienced person in our team had 17 years of engineering experience. And so the risk that we took was bringing on, relatively high cost base relatively soon. And then also there are various ways in which you can kind of bootstrap an automotive product. You can use this facility called the MSVA, the Single Vehicle Approval Authority, to basically approve each individual vehicle to make it road legal. Whereas we went down a very costly and extensive process called the homologation process, where you basically send vehicles off to a sort of center and you pay a lot of money for them to be bashed to pieces and undergo lots and lots of testing to assess that they are road legal. And then you get a kind of homologation quality stamp. And all major European players, every car that you see on the road will have gone through that process. All those videos that you've seen of crash tests and all that kind of stuff. And we invested in that because we wanted our product to be of a high enough quality that we could export it without any concern or risk to the consumer. And both, the experienced hires and the homologation, that's a big step to take as a young company that's yet to prove the concept with, sales volumes. But I think it's paid off because whereas a lot of EV startups have failed because they've had product issues, they've had recalls, we haven't. And we have an incredibly low product fault rate as a result. And we've been commended on our product quality. So I think that was a pretty big risk. It could have been, but it's definitely paid off.
In terms of building the brand then, how important has building social media presence, building, a brand loyalty been to the growth and the success, would you say? And how much do you focus on kind of the online presence?
Well, I mean, it's been crucial. I mean, I think there's a lot of strands to it. I mean, particularly important in our sector, and maybe across all product sectors, is product reviews, is the PR space. It's really important that when you go on Google and you type in Maeving or electric motorbike and you sort of search for us, that there are a plethora of good reviews from third party, adjudicators who basically go, yes, this is a legit business, this is a good company, this is a good product, you'll love it. So that was a really important piece. But no, online presence is crucial for us because as a direct business, we don't rely on distributors and stores for our presence. Most people will find us through a Google search or through a meta campaign and then enter our universe and speak to, one of our sales team or kind of learn about us and make their decision over a contracted period of time. But no, absolutely crucial. I'd say that we're a very brand centric business, and we're really, as I said, leaning into the kind of British heritage, and so that's been very important. And it wasn't that long ago that if you ask the average person on the street, have you heard of these guys? They'd say no. And now I feel like we're sort of cutting through a little bit more, and people have heard of us, which is really nice.
I love the story that I heard on your BBC interview where you said that you and Will were in the car together and someone pulled up alongside on one of the bikes. And
that was one of the big I'd always said that was one of the things that I was most excited, just in terms of things that you're proud of when you start a business. People can talk about opening their first store, their first sale, first bit of investment. But one of the things for me was the idea that you would be at the traffic lights, or, maybe on one of our bikes or not, and someone completely random who you've never met, you've had no interaction with. Because your first few customers, you know them all by name. But when it had got to the stage that it was a completely random person, they didn't know who I was, pulling up next to me at the lights on one of our bikes, that was a very proud moment. For sure. Yeah, I think we said that the minute that happened, we had to go and buy a bottle of champagne and drink it there and then, which I'm not sure quite happened because I think it was an awkward moment, but we did subsequently have a bottle between us.
So I can imagine, you talk there about the first few customers, you literally know them by name, you're seeing those orders drop in, and it's, very special in those early days. But as a business grows, you need to grow as an individual and learn to start letting go of things. And as you say, bringing in the team, expanding the team, becoming more the CEO of the company, something that, of course, you're not taught at school. How do you find that? Do you find sometimes you just want to get in the weeds and get stuck in and you've got to stop yourself from doing that a little bit, or do you still very hands-on?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a balance. I think you have to get good at saying no and understanding what you need to, what you need to hand over to your team. I mean, there's a reason why you hire experienced people, and also, Will and I are the least experienced people in the company, so it's not suitable for us to be being too hands-on in with certain things. You've got to trust the people that you hire, but equally, I think it's important as you grow to not become so divorced from the day-to-day. You need to understand what the problems are on the ground. I mean, it's our factory, basically our office is on a kind of mezzanine that runs around the factory floor. And so it's really helpful to be able to walk down and understand what's going on any given day, in terms of production, to see the bikes being loaded up into the vans and understand the delivery and servicing, schedules and so on and so forth. So I think you simultaneously have to let go and trust the people that you've hired to ultimately run, their departments. But you also can't be too divorced from what's going on the ground, or it'll take you months to realize that, you've got a particular customer service issue or whatever it might be that you need to understand. A
lot of people start a business because they want to escape the rat race. They want more freedom, they want more time, they obviously want more finance and income. It feels like that perhaps wasn't the driving force for you at the beginning, Seb. There was a bigger mission, there was a passion and you got into it. But, did looking at now being a business owner, do you feel like this now is giving you the opportunity to enjoy more further down in life now that you're building an asset, and hopefully at one stage, that asset will be able to generate profits without you necessarily needing to be there?
Yeah, I totally understand. You're right that it wasn't the key driver for me in starting the business. I think creatively the idea of starting a business really appealed to me, definitely contributing positively to climate change. But of course, financial freedom and personal freedom is something that becomes more and more appealing to you, particularly if the business seems like it's going well. But I really would say, and this is probably not what you or your business, your aspiring entrepreneurs want to hear, but starting a business is a huge risk, and statistically you will fail. So yes, it's true that if it goes well, there's no better way to sort of generate considerable wealth and to give yourself financial freedom eventually, but the odds are not in your favor. And the thing I can absolutely guarantee is that whilst you're in it, you're sort of in the weeds, and whilst you're really growing it, you definitely will not have personal freedom. I think a lot of people equate being a boss, being your own boss, to personal freedom. That's not the case at all. It gives you an overwhelming list of responsibilities that, tie you to your desk at times when you wish that you could be, spending time with the people that you love in your life, and so on and so forth. So I think you need to go into starting a business with your eyes open. And it's a huge risk. But the reality is, if you've got the blood of an entrepreneur in you, you will have a high risk tolerance. And there'll be nothing that I nor anyone else can do to deter you. So it's self-selecting in that sense. You will have complete self-belief. And I know that if Maeving continues to be a success, in addition to sort of personal and financial freedom, it will be I'll have a tremendous sense of achievement and fulfillment from it. Building something from the ground up that I can be proud of, and seeing products in customers' hands that they enjoy. Sorry, yeah, a bit of an amble there, but I think that viewing it as a sort of a get rich quick or even get rich slow scheme is a risky business. I think going into it because you're passionate about the product, you want to build something, you're up for the creative challenge, and you can shoulder the risk. Possibly because you're young and you don't have 5 mouths to feed, and so on and so forth. But as I said, yeah, you if you want to do it, you'll do it, irrespective of what I say, for sure. No one could have told me not to do it.
In terms of diversifying, so a lot of business owners, obviously, it's all consuming, right? You're focused on your business day in, day out. As you start to generate profits, and you're able to start to pay yourself a bit more, are you thinking about diversifying, taking some profits, putting them into other areas, other assets at all at this stage?
I think yes is the short answer. I mean, I guess I've been so focused on getting this business off the ground, alongside my co-founder, that I'm nowhere near thinking about that. But yes, eventually, certainly. I think as you get older, and certainly as you develop more responsibilities, if you start having kids and that kind of thing, you don't want all your eggs to be in the same basket. And I think that there's also a risk of thinking that a business, it might be going well in years 1 to 5 or 5 to 10. Something terrible like COVID could come along and, and cause a problem in years 10 to 15. So I think diversification as you mature and as the business reaches a level of security is obviously a good idea. Sure.
Even within the business now, diversification in terms of revenue streams and income, we talk a lot about, if you can have a high degree of recurring income in a business, repeat customers, that's a great thing to have. Is that something you thought about at Maeving?
So yes, in terms of repeat income and kind of level. So not in terms of diversification of different sort of products and verticals and categories. We'll always want to be pretty myopic in our focus in who we're trying to make bikes for. But for example, introducing a stronger American market to iron out the seasonality of our products. At the moment in Europe, bikers ride between March and October. And that, you don't want a seasonal business like that, particularly when a lot of other businesses really pick up over Christmas. And so having the, Southern California, Florida, places like that, sort of flattening that curve is really, really helpful. As I said, the direct-to-consumer model encourages repeat purchase because you have that direct relationship with your customer. So your sort of lifetime value goes up, which is really, really helpful. Servicing for us is a profit center. So again, being a direct to consumer manufacturer means that we have a servicing model, which again will become more and more of a kind of revenue generator as we grow. But yeah, so I think that's the way in which I think about diversification as opposed to sector adjacent moves.
In terms of cars, electric cars, you could say Tesla obviously being one of the leaders at the forefront there. Did you look at them? Did you look at the way they use apps to control things, to be able to contact you for servicing, and any ideas that were brought across, not just from them, but from obviously...
Totally. So I think the first distinction I would make is that we very specifically made our bikes sort of simple and not too techy. I think for me, the reason that people like bikes is because of the simplicity and the engagement with your surroundings, unlike being in a Model Y with sort of heated seats or cooled seats and climate control and all, sort of things like that. So all of our tech is quite kind of background. We do have an app for GPS for theft recovery, for example. It also gives you telematic data and that kind of stuff. And we're looking to move our sort of servicing communications and our customer interaction into that space eventually. And that's where the inspiration comes for sure from the likes of Tesla. And there's lots of other companies as well that are doing that well, but not in a sort of high tech, tech intrusive way. I think more in terms of facilitating good customer relationships, for sure.
Yeah, and that's reflected in the design to some degree, isn't it? You still got the old school retro style to the bikes.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I think the old school aesthetic, it's we have it. We're not allergic to tech. Whether it's things like the sort of drop-in connector that makes the batteries really easy to use, or as I say, that app, or the way in which we interact with customers, I think that's all quite tech-enabled. And there's certainly bits of tech that we're going to introduce in the future in order to do some interesting kind of innovative things with our products. But I think it's just more that it's a slightly more sort of background, approach.
So I think you said at the beginning, there were 297 electric bikes sold in around 2017 to 2018. Is that
in
right?
UK in total, yeah. I mean,
Yeah. What was the figure last year, Seb?
So last year, so now I think it was about 4,000. Yeah, about 4,000. It's kind of at 4,000. I mean, France has broken through the 10,000 barrier. India is growing at an outrageous rate. I mean, basically there's two stories. There's the kind of Asian story and there's the UK and European story. And unfortunately, the UK is dragging its heels within that. So, look, I mean, the way I look at it is there's a huge amount of headroom for growth, which is encouraging.
Absolutely. And being the first, it always puts you in good place. Do you constantly kind of looking around at, well, who else is creeping into the market? And, how do you focus on that, or do you just focus on being the best that you can be?
Well, we focus on in terms of market research for informing products going forward. It's always interesting to see what competitors are doing, but it's also, you've got to be careful not to get too scared by other startups, particularly in the hardware space. When we in the first 2 years of our starting the business, we'd be terrified every time we saw a new electric motorcycle startup rear its head. And the reality is it's so hard starting a business and starting a hardware business and getting a good team together and making products that can pass homologation and so on and so forth, that almost all of those players have disappeared. I mean, literally, you can count on your fingers now the number of certainly European and UK, EV startups that have succeeded, and a lot of them have failed for the same reasons. So you've got to, at some point, be careful not to become too distracted by what's going on around you. I think it's always interesting thinking about what the incumbent, OEMs will do eventually. They've been pretty slow in the space, and obviously you've seen the likes of Tesla, but also Chinese companies like Yadea and Ola in India. These are companies that are now some of the biggest two-wheeler companies in the world, and you haven't heard of them. They're just so. There is absolutely the space to completely, take share from the existing incumbents.
So final thoughts then, Seb. Would you class yourself as a visionary? And are you looking into the future now? Are you looking 12 months ahead, 5 years ahead, 20 years ahead?
Oh God, it feels very. I don't think I'm too British to say that I'm a visionary. I think you have to. in order to start a successful business, you've got to sort of nail your colours to a mast in terms of a vision of what you think is going to happen. I believe that two-wheelers will play a huge role in the future of urban travel. And that's why we've started this business, and that's why we've geared our bikes towards urban travel and champion removable batteries. I certainly have a view as to what I think the next 10, 20 years of kind of EV development in the space will look like, what will and will not happen. And we have a product pipeline that is geared towards riding that, that transformation. So yeah, I'll say yes. I'll say yes. I am a visionary. But I would also say that one of the things that happens when you're kind of in the weeds of starting a business is that there's a risk that the way that Will and I call it is you forget to look up. You're so focused on the kind of day to day, how's the factory running? What are the expenses? What's happening with this individual, that you've got to make sure that you keep on kind of replenishing your vision and that it keeps on growing and that you don't kind of get to the end of it. You don't get to the end of a 5-year plan and then realize that you don't have a plan for the next 5 years. And we're definitely at that kind of inflection point now where growth is good. We feel like we've established ourselves in the market, and it's now really important for us to actually build on that and continue to make market leading products, not just to sort of rest on your laurels and assume that you can expect 300% growth year on year for the foreseeable.
So for someone listening now, Seb, who's embarking on a similar journey, starting a business, if you were looking back now to give yourself some advice at the beginning, what would be a key piece of advice for someone?
Oh gosh, definitely surround yourself with good people. The old adage of people, make good businesses, good people make good businesses is completely true. All of our success has been due to good advice from good advisors, amazingly experienced professionals. So yeah, get a co-founder as a first step, and then surround yourself with good people at every stage of the business. And then also, everything will take twice as long, cost twice as much, and be twice as hard as you expected. So yeah, make sure you've got the cash and the energy to get you through.
Seb, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today. If listeners want to learn more about Maeving or get in touch, where can they find you?
It's an absolute pleasure. So just pop online, maeving.com or Maeving Electric Motorcycles if you want to go on Instagram and check us out.
All right. I hope you enjoyed listening to Seb there. So before we dive in, Kevin, let's just head to Trustpilot and say thanks to those that have left a review this week. And I'm going to scroll through and pull out one from Bishoy. And Bishoy says, WealthBuilders has been a great part of my wealth building journey. I particularly like their cash flow board game events. As far as I'm aware, they are the only organization that run these events on a regular basis. Not only is it great fun, but you get to meet and network with a lot of like-minded people, from beginners to seasoned investors. Highly recommend WealthBuilders as a whole.
Very nice. I love events. We talked about the Nick James event. We've talked about, in many cases, historically, Chris, that wealth building, whether in business like Seb or other assets, can be quite isolating. It's good if you've got a business partner, and that's great in his case, but can be quite a lonely journey because in the main, you're the pioneer, and pioneers are cutting a path forward. And when you're doing that, you're often at the sharp end all of the time, and you get so little time to, I suppose, really get a sounding board, second opinions, good guidance, lessons and mentorship. So I think it's critical, in my view, that you surround yourself with like-minded people, just as the review has indicated there, because that's the best way to keep you accountable. It's the best way to keep you motivated. It's the best way for you to realize that this is possible because other people are doing it. So, so keep the events going. Chris, on the cash flow, that seems to be going down great guns, and we hope to widen the cash flow game. So if you're somewhere in the UK or even around the world and you're interested in hosting a cash flow event together with us, that would be great to know, because at some point, Chris, we would hope to be hosting these all around the UK.
We sure would, yeah. And you can actually head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/cashflow. And if you're interested in being a host, you can fill out a form and submit that to us right there. Okay, so let's stick on that theme then, talking about working with others. So Seb, of course, is co-founder with Will for Maeving. And taking it back to the beginning, I asked him, what was the vision? And he said really all they wanted to do was be involved in some way towards tackling, climate change. And then they kind of fused that with a love and a passion of motor vehicles and then bikes, and then spotting an opportunity. So every entrepreneur obviously sees a problem, thinks, hang on, we could do something about that. And obviously he was traveling, commuting in London, busy city, and seeing the opportunity that there were no electric bikes available in the UK. And it just kind of merged all of these things that they wanted to do. And there was the business idea.
Well, I think the other lesson I'm picking up from entrepreneurs, Chris, is go to pubs a lot. Because, the best ideas often get stimulated from a pub. And I believe that was a pub in Durham at university. And I think when we spoke to Louise, there was some drinks involved. So the more you go to pubs, the better it is.
Yeah. So moving on from that, they then decided, okay, start the business. And I think there's lots of good lessons here and how long it takes in that initial proof of concept stage. They started the business 2018. It was 2022 before they actually launched to market. And they talked about the tough times, having to sort of do those gig jobs just to bring in some money. And, I think you have to be prepared for that, don't you, when you embark on starting a new business?
And also to the resilience to go through COVID. Do you remember he talked about raising funding, and then the funding kind of got pulled because of the fear and the reaction to the pandemic. And I'm so pleased that the story ends up with a happy ending, that money did come through. And it's just so interesting when you look at the difference in the size of the market between, you talked about China, India, other warmer countries where you don't have this huge seasonality like we have in this country. So, a very interesting one. But I do love the idea that they've really found a home. I think it's Coventry is where they make their vehicles. And that's the true historical home of all the major bike manufacturers, BSA, Triumph, Norton. Anybody who follows bikes will know that so many engineers and experts are in that Coventry area. So, and that tradition, I love the idea of the modern, working towards climate change and making vehicles that typically deal with an average commute for a week, which is somewhere around about the 12 miles a day, I think, if I remember the stats. So, you can, that sort of means you've got a week's worth of charge. But to take the battery and be able to plug it in and charge it reminds me of, I'm an older man now. So when I play golf, I've got a powered trolley, and I take the battery out and I charge it, and then you go again. But to think about that as a commuter travel, I think is genius. And I just love the idea, the combination of that together with something that looks great. And we're not talking about low cost products here. We're talking about premium products, and that's reflected, I think, in the design and the history, and fair play to them. But the thing that impressed me more than anything else, other than that resilience and all the things we've talked about, is there is a recurring income business in there. It's not just the sale of the motor vehicles, the bikes themselves, but the fact that they deliver them really where you are, and they don't have the cost of a network of branches, of showrooms, and they bring the bike to you and they service the bike where you are, means who wouldn't take that up? I mean, the conversion rate of the number of people who buy the bike compared to the number of people who would want to be serviced where they are, I would expect that to be so high, and therefore has a very strong recurring income. And if you can do that in a business, then your business is worth infinitely more when you come to sell it. So, good luck to Seb with that one. It's just a combination of brilliant ideas all wrapped into one, which is why I think it was a good one for you, Chris, to found and to pull out and to share the wealth lessons that are still to be made by them. but they're definitely on the right track.
Yeah, and what I liked was that whilst, of course, Seb and Will, they're building an asset for the long term, it was also the feeling of personal achievement of building something from the ground up. And that's something, obviously, that, you can't get from necessarily just being in a job. Of course, you can have loyalty and, be rewarded and recognized. But when it's something you've created, when you've turned it from an idea in your head to something that is actually impacting hundreds or thousands or even millions of people in the world, then that's something pretty special.
Indeed, yeah. So fair play to Seb and the rest of his team.
Yeah, well done. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, and someone, perhaps they're a bike enthusiast, they'd like to hear that story, hit the share button and send that to somebody else. We'd really appreciate that as we continue to build our brand and spread the name of Wealth Talk across the globe, Kevin. And on that note, we should sign out for today. But we'll be back same time, same place next week.
We will indeed. Until then, as long as you don't go to Ibiza again, I'll see you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the WealthBuilders membership site to help you create, build and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.